When I first married Daniel, I knew life would never be simple. He was a single father to a teenage boy named Mateo, and while I believed in love and second chances, blending families was not something I had prepared for. I was 34 at the time, still learning about patience and compromise, and Daniel, at 40, was the kind of man who carried his responsibilities heavily on his shoulders. He loved his son more than anything in the world, and I admired that about him. But it also meant that my place in their little unit was uncertain. Mateo was 15 when I came into his life. Teenagers are complicated on the best of days, and Mateo had already been through so much. His mother, Rebecca, had left when he was only 8. She had promised to visit, promised to call, but over time those promises faded into silence. It left Mateo with a quiet sadness, a guarded way of looking at people, and a sharp distrust of anyone who tried to step into his world. When Daniel introduced me to him for the first time, Mateo's eyes were polite but distant, as if he were evaluating me not as a person, but as another potential disappointment. The early days of our marriage were rough. I wanted to bond with Mateo, but he resisted every effort I made. I'd try cooking his favorite foods, and he'd pick at them with disinterest. I'd ask about his school projects or sports, and he'd shrug, mumbling one-word answers. Daniel tried to reassure me, saying it would take time. But some nights, when I was lying awake in bed next to my husband, I couldn't help but wonder if Mateo would ever accept me. Over the years, things softened. Not completely, but enough that we started to share small moments together. We'd watch a show in the living room, both of us pretending not to enjoy it while sneaking glances at each other's reactions. Sometimes he'd help me carry groceries in from the car without being asked. Other times, he'd make a sarcastic comment that I knew was his awkward way of trying to joke with me. These little gestures gave me hope that maybe, someday, we'd build something stronger. But then came the night when everything shifted, the night when, while I was sleeping, Mateo confessed a secret that changed everything. It was a Friday, late spring, when the air still carried that cool freshness that hinted at summer but hadn't yet given way to its heavy heat. Daniel was away on a work trip, something he rarely did but couldn't avoid this time. It meant just Mateo and me in the house. I had been nervous about it, wondering if the silence between us would feel unbearable. But surprisingly, the evening had gone smoothly. We ordered pizza, and he even laughed at a joke I made about the delivery driver's beat-up car. It felt normal, almost like what a family evening should feel like. Later that night, I went to bed earlier than usual. I was exhausted from work and trusted that Mateo was old enough to handle himself for a few more hours before turning in. I remember drifting off with the sound of the TV faintly playing in the background. What I didn't expect was to wake in the middle of the night to the sound of someone talking. At first, I thought it was the television, left on in the living room. But as my senses sharpened in the darkness, I realized the voice was closer. It was coming from Mateo. I stayed still, my breathing shallow, listening. He was sitting just outside my bedroom door. His voice was low, almost a whisper, but steady enough for me to catch fragments of what he was saying. "I don't know how to tell her," he murmured. "She tries so hard, and I don't want to hurt her. But I can't keep pretending everything's fine. It's eating me alive." My heart thudded. Was he talking about me? I held my breath, straining to hear more. "She's not my mom. She'll never be my mom. And I feel bad because sometimes I wish she would stop trying. But then I feel guilty because she doesn't deserve that. She didn't do anything wrong. She's actually the best person in this house most of the time. But I just don't know how to let her in. It feels like if I do, I'm betraying Mom. Even though Mom left." His words pierced me deeper than I could have imagined. I had spent years trying to earn his trust, his affection, only to realize that the wall between us wasn't built from dislike or hate. It was built from loyalty to someone who had walked away. Mateo's voice cracked as he continued. "And sometimes I think maybe I should tell Dad, but then I don't want him to worry. He already works so hard, and I don't want to make things worse. So I just keep it all inside. But it hurts. It hurts so much." I lay there frozen, tears stinging my eyes. I wanted to get up, to open the door, to tell him I had heard everything and that he didn't need to hide his pain anymore. But something held me back. Maybe it was the fear of embarrassing him, or maybe it was the understanding that this was his private confession, meant for the silence of the night, not for me. After a while, his voice faded. I heard him shift, then walk back toward his room. The house fell silent again, but my mind was loud with everything I had heard. The next morning, I wasn't sure how to face him. At breakfast, he sat across from me, scrolling on his phone, acting as though nothing had happened. I wanted to reach across the table and hug him, to tell him I understood now. But I also knew I had to tread carefully. Mateo had opened up in the only way he knew how, when he thought no one was listening. If I confronted him about it, he might retreat even further. So instead, I chose small steps. I asked him about his weekend plans, and when he gave his usual shrug, I said gently, "Well, if you ever want to talk about anything, I'm here." He looked up briefly, his eyes meeting mine for a second longer than usual, before nodding. It was subtle, but I felt it. He knew I meant it. Over the next weeks, I noticed little changes. He started spending more time in the kitchen when I cooked, sometimes offering to chop vegetables or stir the pot. He'd linger in the living room after dinner, sitting quietly while I read a book, as though my presence no longer felt like an intrusion. And one evening, when we were watching a movie, he actually laughed, really laughed, and then looked at me with a softness I had never seen before. I never told him I overheard his midnight confession. It remained my secret, a gift he never intended to give me, but one that changed the way I understood him forever.
His walls weren't about me.
They were about his grief, his loyalty, and his fear of letting go of the mother he lost. Knowing that gave me patience, gave me compassion, and gave me the strength to keep showing up for him, even when it was hard. Months later, Daniel came home from work one evening to find us sitting at the table, arguing playfully over which pizza toppings were superior. He looked at us, his eyes wide with surprise, and then his face softened into a smile. "I don't know what happened while I was gone," he said, "but I'm glad to see this." I smiled back at him, but kept Mateo's secret tucked safely in my heart. Because sometimes, love isn't about big gestures or dramatic confrontations. Sometimes, it's about listening when you're not supposed to, understanding without being asked, and holding someone's pain gently until they're ready to share it themselves. And that night, when I had woken to the sound of a boy's whispered confession, I realized something profound. Mateo didn't need me to replace his mother. He just needed me to stay.